Welcome to Cloud Dialogues. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Welcome to Cloud Dialogues, episode 24. We're actually doing a series for executives on topics that are important in cloud in 2025. Last time it was finance, for cloud for CFOs, effectively. And this time we're doing cloud transformation and experiences and building cloud-ready teams and cultures. And we're lucky enough to have two guests. So I'm joined by Georgia, as per usual. So she can say hello in her cold, windy London, probably.
Hello,
Dark
hello.
London. And
I don't think the
we've
sun
got
exists.
still not existing.
Don't think so.
And we've got uh, Karen Bullen. Are you from London, Karen?
I'm not from London, no, I'm from the southwest, but it's just as equally as murky as it in London, probably.
Okay. So the weather holds. And we've got Ross Garbutt from sunny Sydney, probably humid. Sunny Sydney is my guess.
It is a bit, but yeah, I certainly won't complain about the weather to the England people.
So before our discussion with two guests, we'll just run through some news items that came up this week. The first one, Georgia brought to my attention. She seems to be a data center expert these days. And it's about AI. Concern around the UK's AI ambitions could lead to water shortages. What's that all about, Georgia?
So I was at a conference last week, and one of the main tracks that they had was on data centers, and they were talking a little bit about water. And one of the data center providers was saying all of our cooling, or the majority of our cooling, is liquid cooling, right? But then I think the data reflects that effectively only in 5 years or so from now that we're only going to have 30% of data centers in liquid cooling, which should reduce water requirements, right? But AI workloads obviously require a lot of cooling because they are very heavy compute. So I think as like users of the technology, but also as a society, is something that we need to consider, is that if we don't look to implement new technology faster, we're going to have a water problem. And I think in some situations we already are, right? So something to be mindful of. Interestingly, do you know there are only 2 data centers in the UK that have AI workloads outside of the hyperscalers? There's 2.
Really?
Yeah, it's a
I
hard thing to
almost
do,
that.
evidently, right? It seems like the requirement in terms of how you design the data center in order to enable the cooling, etc. It's not something that you can really retrofit to existing data centers. You almost have to start afresh. And obviously the power requirements are quite high as well. So just other things to consider, how we're going to power all these data centers, and how we're going to cool them as well, which obviously we need to really consider those environmental impacts.
And it's not cheap to build one either, right? So it's really
No,
people with a lot of money.
I think one of the biggest challenges is finding an area that has enough power. So I guess that's something that the governments will be working with the hyperscalers on. But I think we need to consider our AI use just at a
So
organization, personal level.
on that topic, Agentic AI seems to be, I don't know, it's been around for a while, but I don't know, in the last month, it
It's all
seems to
over.
have
It's
been
all over LinkedIn.
it's flavor of the month. And I wanted to check some data on that. So I went into Google Trends. And definitely within January, like the last month, the trend for agentic AI has gone up. I don't know if it's related to the DeepSeek.
DeepSeek.
Yeah. I don't know if it's related to that or not. I don't know if there's any correlation. I'm trying to find an event, but I couldn't necessarily find one other than everyone's searching and talking about it all of a sudden. And for people who haven't heard of the term, so AI agents have been around for a while, and they're basically single tasks. So an AI agent can perform one task. You might ask a query or whatever, and it might go off and do one thing. Agentic AI is about autonomous decisions and going through a series of events with some guardrails in place, which are very important because I don't want my AI doing whatever it wants to my computer, for example, right? So there's basically 4 steps. So there's perception, gathering the data around, like what it needs to deal with the query, reasoning, processing the data to understand what's going on, figuring out what actions it needs to take. So that's the third step. And the fourth one is around learning and the time from what it did previously. So it's not about going through, program is going through, if then this, if then that, do that reasoning and action and learning and improving over time. So I think watch this space for that sort of stuff because it's probably going to get big this year, I suspect. AI, Georgia. There's a lot of AI programs being shut down, interestingly enough.
Yeah, I mean, I saw or I heard, I think it was on the news that Accenture like shelved theirs on Friday, which, you know, I mean, obviously they have a female CEO, so it's kind of interesting, but I feel obviously it's disappointing and it's upsetting for some organizations, as I guess, maybe like for more diverse people, and this is really upsetting, right? For more diverse people, there may be opportunities to hire people into other countries to hire really talented people. So for some organizations, this might be an opportunity to help someone that perhaps no longer wants to live in America, for example, right? Which would be totally understandable. And I think for some people, it's an opportunity, but obviously, yeah, I mean, I feel like in the example of Accenture, if you're effectively being told that, you're going to lose hundreds of millions of work if you don't do this, I mean, that's effectively the ultimatum. I think when
Yeah.
from what I understand that they're being presented with, I don't really know what you're supposed to do, right? The whole thing is just unbelievable. But it was good to see a few organizations stepped up on their DEI policies and said, no, we're still doing this. I think Microsoft was one of them. Oh, what were the others? I had a list somewhere. EY was another one.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
EY. Yep.
I think it's a I mean, there's obviously the question of power, right? And with consulting, it's difficult because you run such low margins on your entire business, whereas organizations like Microsoft just organically have a lot more power as a hyperscaler, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, the whole thing it's pretty sad. I don't know, Karen, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic, right? So even now, I think because I've come from industry before coming to consultancy, someone at my level in infrastructure and operations in terms of gender, in terms of the D&I for gender, was 5% for somebody
Yeah.
in the UK.
Yeah.
So that's quite disappointing, right? But it's also how do we attract talent and diversity as well, right? So I've often given talks to graduates and also for school and school leavers about coming in and STEM subjects and coming to the world of IT. And I still think it's a bit of a struggle, right, from a gender perspective.
Oh, definitely.
I think it's, and I've been in this industry for 25 years, right? So, and still to be only 5% represented is still quite poor, I think. And I think diversity is important. It doesn't matter. I'm not just talking about gender. I think across the board, I think it provides greater kind of insights, innovation into the team, different opinions, different points of view. I think all of those things are plus, actually. And I still, but I think maybe they were being too strong on the KPIs that they were trying to follow. I think it perhaps should happen a bit more organically, but I still think it's important to have diversity in your team or in your organisation.
Yeah, I'm not across the KPIs. I honestly, at the moment, just aside from what we're doing here in terms of tech news, I don't watch the news because otherwise I would just be depressed all day. That's all I'm going to say about that. What else do we have? What else do we
The
have?
last point is not depressing at all. Global layoffs continuing.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
It was Meta this week, so there you go. So even Meta are not immune from downsizing in probably targeted areas.
They also shelved their DI. They were one of the first out of the gate, I believe,
Oh,
to
really?
say that they were getting, yes. Yeah, I mean, I think that layoffs in the world that we're working in, especially it being so tumultuous, is kind of like a normal thing that we should expect. But at the same time, I do think there should be some scrutiny on these organizations. I do think there should be some scrutiny to try to, because it's normal to have constant restructuring, right? We probably should be always constantly, and I've seen some leaders do this really well, is constantly moving people around in their organization in order to meet the needs of their customers into the future, right? Like I've seen some leaders do this really exceptionally well. I really think that it's almost unacceptable, and it should be unacceptable from a regulatory perspective to just be, laying off thousands of people. It's like, what is your rationale outside of laziness for doing this?
I know.
I
Cost
honestly
cutting.
think that it
Easy way
needs
to
to be
cut
more
costs.
regulated. I honestly think it needs to be more regulated. And I'm like the more of an I don't like regulation, as you know, Matt. I'm like, government, go away. But I honestly think that there needs to be questions and answers for this. You should need to thoroughly explain yourself to the governments in the countries that you are operating in if you are laying off, a significant amount of people. Because if it's done well, we shouldn't be having significant layoffs. It should be small. And then if you're making small changes over time, those people have more of an opportunity to kind of find other roles as opposed to flooding the market with tons of people in tech or whatever their skill set might be.
Yeah, I agree, Georgia, right? It should be looking at future opportunities, growing opportunities for your staff and with what's going on in the market and what the customers want, right? Creating those opportunities, not just mass layoffs. I agree.
Cool. Well, that's our news section for the week.
Right. Okay. All right. Shall we go into intros?
Yeah, let's do some intros. So the reason why we're doing this is because success in cloud transformation relies heavily on like leadership and team alignment, and also fostering a culture of innovation. So we thought we'd bring on two guests that have done this before and, share their experiences and hopefully help someone else along the way. So Karen, you can go first. Just give us a brief intro and background on your experiences.
Yeah, sure.
Please.
Yeah, no problem at all. So yeah, I'm Karen Bullen, and I've recently joined Capgemini Invent as a consultant. But actually, I've switched from industry. So I've been sort of 25 years plus in infrastructure and operations, and recently held the position of head of infrastructure and operations at two of the UK's iconic companies, so Dyson and EasyJet. Now, both of these companies were organically grown. They're still quite young, actually, and I guess there was a need to keep transforming because it's the way, the nature of it, how everything was organically grown. So, and that's, I guess, innovation was kind of key to kind of the success of the business, particularly Dyson, right? So you're talking products and innovation all the time. And having the technology to keep up with the demand of the customers was really key.
Thanks, Karen. Ross, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. So I'm head of infrastructure hosting for Insignia Financial, which is a large financial services company in Australia. So my remit is all infrastructure hosting, including traditional data centers, networking, and cloud. And so this role was sort of created to ensure that we create an environment where we are making decisions around hosting, regardless of where it is, whether it's on cloud or on premise. It shouldn't matter. It should be for the right reasons financially for the organization. So my background, I worked in and around software engineering pretty much my whole career before moving into a cloud-focused role only, and then now obviously looking after hosting in general, which is busy and exciting.
Cool. Thanks, Ross. Yes, and that journey at Insignia has taken a bit of a while, hasn't it? What was the trigger for you guys to move to cloud in the first place?
Well, for Insignia, so actually, I'm fortunate. I've actually been involved in two greenfield cloud migrations now. The current one at Insignia, the trigger was an acquisition So Insignia purchased an organisation that had quite a strong presence in cloud, and Insignia didn't. And so I came on to look after the team and set up the team to set up their cloud hosting, their platform team, and create the first cloud environment for them, so that we could start the process of bringing over the applications that were required as part of the purchase.
Yes, that was quite a journey, which we'll probably get into.
Yeah.
What was it? So you just mentioned you're involved in another one. What was that?
Yeah, that was so a little while ago now. So the trigger for that was very different. That was really born out of frustration with the incumbent provider of the on-premise hosting. I won't name any names, but there was an outsource arrangement with a hosting provider, infrastructure provider, and the service just wasn't up to scratch. And so the process started, and it's quite common, I think, in the industry. There's some little skunkworks projects that pop up here and there, and people start looking at the hyperscalers to see what they can do to get themselves sort of out of the data centers and controlling their own infrastructure and speeding up innovation and not being so slow. So that was a very different trigger at the time, but end result, roughly the same.
Yeah, 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 and that shows that there's two definitely.
So I think one of the key things that we wanted our listeners to get out of today is that obviously the world is undergoing a lot of change in 2025, and there's a lot going on. Given that you both are highly experienced cloud transformation leaders and business transformation leaders, moving to cloud is a people problem, right? It's a cultural problem. What are some of the things that you have experienced and that will be important to executives in 2025 in terms of what are the challenges that you're going to face as you try to change your organization?
Yeah, sure. When we're talking about sort of the change and moving to cloud and having a cloud first strategy, it's not just about that technology. I think that's probably the bit that you can roadmap, you can put out, etc. But actually adding in the culture piece and the change for people working in cloud across the organization, I think is actually more important. And I guess just from my experience, before we acted and started the kind of delivery and implementation, was to kind of look at, well, how is this going to affect our people? How are people going to work in a slightly different way? How are they going to have to change their mindset to become on that cloud journey within that strategy? So it's very much kind of like looking at skill set, for example. Do we have the right skill set? We don't want to kind of go out and bring that skill set in. Let's actually upskill our teams, our wider organisation about cloud, what it means to be in cloud, and I guess the outcomes it's going to bring for everybody. So for me, it was around that piece, and we started with actually upskilling what was a traditional infrastructure team. Yeah, making sure they've got the right skills and ready to work in a cloud environment, but also the ways of working. So perhaps starting to look at agile ways of working, how that's going to kind of help with them consuming some of those cloud services and getting the value out of cloud, right? So if you don't have the team to do it with you, you're not going to get that value out of cloud. So I think those are the things we started looking at. I think those are key things, really. And you need to keep innovating, right? So there was a point of, well, let's look at the capacity of the team as well, and making sure they've got the capacity to learn, to innovate, to do POCs, to do POVs. It was built into their ways of working, so they could keep innovating and then bring that value of the cloud into the business, and then obviously ultimately onto the customers. So I think those are some of the key points.
And they can learn during that phase, right? Because that phase allows them to do that learning and bring in some early value.
Absolutely. And they were also part of kind of pilot. So they were very much integrated and working in a much more cross-functional way of working. Whereas before they might have been working more in a siloed way of working. So the idea was to kind of more collaborative working in short 3-day workshops, for example, in terms of a migration of a particular application. They would get together, work in a room together and working much more collaborative. That then brings in that kind of that that mindset change of working in a slightly different way, and the innovation, trying out new things, trial and error with that kind of working and piloting, that was all key to kind of building up their skill set, as well as some of the leaders becoming platform owners and understanding what it means to be a platform owner and being much more customer centric, which again was a complete change in mindset for people who have been very in the weeds technical. It was about them trying to understand their customers, or the albeit internal customers, and work in a slightly different way and having those feedback loops with their customers, etc. Very much changing mindset, a different way of working that goes along with getting the value out of cloud.
One of the things that you said there, Karen, and I think this is a really important point, was about looking at team capacity as you're going through that transformation. And I think in 2025, one of the biggest challenges that a lot of the executives that I talk to every day are dealing with is the focus is really around cost cutting and like, how do we do things as lean as possible? Like, how do we best mitigate that? How do we best not end up in a situation where our people haven't had the time or capacity to learn, and then either we don't get the adoption that we expected, or potentially things fail?
I think you have to measure it as well, Georgia, right? So set some KPIs around some of that, and in terms of adoption rate, for example, right? Have the team actually working the way that you expected, and what is that adoption rate, and settings, and start measuring it, and then adjust and where you need to. But also it's around when you are doing your planning or sprint planning, you add that capacity in. So allow the team to be able to train, to upskill, to bring the benefits that you need as well. And that might change over time in terms of that capacity. But start somewhere with that capacity, building it into your sprint so they've got time to learn. But also, as I said, the pilot piece is also really important for that piece as well. So those are sort of things that we kind of did. But it's also, like I said before, when we are talking about sort of characteristics of what we expect of a platform or product lead, you need to kind of add that innovation space in, right? Because without that and the continually optimizing that particular platform or product, it's not going to bring the value. So again, it's about adding that capacity.
Pass over to Ross.
Yeah, so a few thoughts. I agree with everything Karen sort of said, especially about the training and upskilling. What I've found is in the early stages of moving to cloud, you find there are individuals that you'll notice are really, really interested and keen, right? And there are individuals who are hesitant. And so what I've found is identify those people who are really keen and interested and keep them close, bring them along for the journey. And then from there, you find that the comfort levels within the organization sort of grows sort of a little bit more organically. I think fundamentally, if you think about the organizational change and the culture change that needs to happen, traditional organizations, particularly large enterprises, have had a central team, an infrastructure team that control hosting, servers, storage, data centers for the organization. What you're agreeing to do and what you're trying to do when you move to cloud is to decentralize that, right? And therein lies part of the challenge. You want to give the ability to the product teams to control their own hosting. If they want another server, they can have one. If they want more storage, they can have it, obviously within the confines of certain guardrails that you've set up and the security perimeter that the platform team has set up. And that's something that's really, really hard to do, because for a product team to go into the cloud, the devs, the developers, and the testers in that team, they need to be comfortable supporting their application in the cloud. And they need to be comfortable enough to actually run it in production and support it and test it. And that is very difficult. It's difficult to know when they're ready. And it takes time and it takes investment. And to George's sort of question earlier about justifying it, I think if there's a business case to move to cloud, it needs to include enough time for people to get ready. You are going to go slower for a while. You are going to go slower. and you will have to spend a little bit on training. It doesn't need to be expensive. You don't need to do weeks of classroom training, but to get to that point where you get the benefits, there is a cost.
I think that takes us kind of back last week to a conversation that we were having with Jez around like revisiting the business case, because obviously a lot of these things are very long-term things, right? So making sure that we have the right considerations, like what you just said there, the Ross, and then revisiting that. Are we actually kind of performing, reasonably to the business case? Is it delivering the value that we thought it would? Obviously, whilst cloud is a fantastic tool, it's not for everything, right? And it's also not for everybody right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if a team is unable for whatever reason to support their application in the cloud, then don't force them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think sometimes, and I was reading about this the other day about like a lot of organizations, employees are facing like change fatigue. How do we manage change fatigue? Sometimes teams are just not ready for it. It's just not the right time. And that comes back to making sure we have really good, strong leadership in place that can prioritize things in accordance with not only like business cases, but also what's going on in the organization and what are people feeling within the organization. Because that's culture, right?
Exactly.
Culture is how the people within our organization feel.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Effectively.
Maybe we'll talk about finance briefly. Obviously, cloud requires a different way of dealing with money. That's probably a question for both of you. Maybe we'll start with Ross. Did you have any challenges with the finance team? Was there a series of steps you had to go through for them to understand that, no, we're not going to capitalize this equipment. We're going to change to an OpEx model? That's always the fun one, right, in doing cloud. Do you have any comments around that?
Oh, these are some fun conversations, aren't they? I think I've been doing this for a while now, and I'm still surprised at how difficult it is to estimate the cost in advance of running in the cloud. Even with all the great calculators that the hyperscalers provide, it's actually really hard to get right. And it's always less than you think it is. And some of the other things I've found recently as well, I worked on some business cases over the past sort of 18 months. I'm constantly surprised by the cost of licenses, enterprise licenses and support that large organizations pay for operating systems and databases and things like that. If you can easily slot into a cloud native alternative, the savings are way more than what you think they are. And so if you spend the time on the business case, it does regularly surprise you in a positive way. And as long as you just have an open conversation with finance or whoever about it and say, look, this is what we think it's going to cost. Yes, there's some risk here. Yes, it might be wrong, but we know intuitively and from experience that we're probably right. And then you take people along for the journey. You do one and you show it works. You do another one, you show it works, and you start to build some momentum in the organization and some trust that this technology has benefit for the organization.
Yeah, I completely agree there. I found with the organisation that I was with that actually let's bring and finance closer together. So when we were creating the FinOps framework, actually we brought in the IT finance manager to be part of and create that framework with us rather than doing it separately. So it wasn't felt like that we were doing it to them. They were part of that journey right from the start. And the kind of FinOps was built in the original business case to make sure that was a work stream that was going to be created as part of the move to cloud. So very much working with them in creating FinOps and getting their understanding of how that was going to work to bring them on their journey. So absolutely, completely agree with what you said there, Ross, too.
And that's a big change, like the finance, like bring IT and finance together, because IT, especially the engineers and architects, well, architects probably more so, but the hands-on engineers, usually that wasn't something that they had to deal with. It was always done for them, right, a lot of the time. So
yeah, and so they were part of the FinOps kind of organisation that we created, and they created the framework, but also they were part of the Cloud Centre of Excellence that we built as well. So again, they're getting the understanding of cloud and how cloud works alongside architects and engineering and the sort of the cloud specialists. So they're very much part of that. And so that cross-functional working across and outside of IT was really important to bring them on this kind of the same journey. So they felt very much part of the journey going to cloud.
What about bringing the business along with you? Are they abstracted from the process? I would think that they would be part of the process because they're getting their stuff quicker. How did you find those interactions?
Yeah, very similar to trying to bring them along the same journey, and get understanding what the value of cloud can bring. Again, bring them on the journey. We mentioned earlier about, I guess, champions, right? So start with an area that might already be slightly in the cloud, or some of the applications might be already in the cloud. Start with them and champion, so they can be the champions for the rest of the business and see what's been done and what the art of the possible is. So it's very much kind of the telling of the story, showing the advantages of being in cloud, and then being part of it as well, right? So rather than doing that big bang approach, it was very much areas that had already a small footprint, albeit non-production, in cloud, and then showcasing that.
A really good point around how do we capitalize? And I was just thinking about this. How do we capitalize on people that are more engaged, especially when it comes to the business? If we think about Net Promoter Score as an example, right? People that are more hesitant to the change, people that are already almost detractors or they're already neutral, they tend to be harder to make really happy customers. But then the people that are already happy customers, if we are able to take them on like a very special journey, you'll find that they talk about you in a really positive way. And that's one of the ways that you get traction within your organization. It's like, well, how do we capitalize on those people that are already really excited about this? How can we give them more to talk about in terms of what cloud can do for them?
Yep.
So I think that's always an opportunity for us as transformation leaders is, what can we help to give them? And maybe it's looking at our opportunity space for innovation, right? How can we help to advance some of the things that they feel that they need as an organization in order to help generate that flywheel of value and activity and happiness, right? Just the thought I was having. I don't know whether that made sense. Did it make sense?
I think so, yes. I'm pretty sure it did. Because you're right. I mean, the way I think about it, the business case is solid and you're making a change to cloud for the right reasons, then the facts are the facts, right? So it either does, if you think about the categories on a cloud migration business case, you're either solving tech debt or you're reducing software licenses or operational effort or reducing cost, and then ultimately enabling the product teams and the business teams to move independently quickly. Once people see that, it's hard to argue with it. And so you sort of generate activity around that, and people who were detractors sort of, even though they took longer, do start to come along.
Drag their feet.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about that. Detractors is one of my favourite topics. How have you both dealt with that? Obviously, that's one way to deal with it, but sometimes detractors don't make sense. So is there any other tips that you can provide our listeners for dealing with those sorts of people?
You need to take your time. Choose your words carefully.
If not,
pick your battles.
Do you have anything on that, Karen?
These are true points, though. Pick your battles. We can only deal with so many things at once, right? I think it's okay for some people to drag their feet.
Yeah. Some people take longer to get there than others, right?
Absolutely. Karen?
I agree. Yeah, sometimes you need to do that, right? But they'll get there, and they'll see that everybody else is going on that journey, right? So they'll want to be part of it, right? I'm sure you may have seen the video with someone just dancing in the middle of the field in a festival. Have you seen that YouTube video? And then someone else joins in, and then somebody else joins in, and then everybody's sort of dancing to the same tune, right? So I think there's an element of that, that they'll see that something exciting is going on, and they've seen kind of what's happening and want to join in. But I think it's just to keep demonstrating the value and how things are changing, and not to be afraid of change. yeah, and that it does have value. So that's all part and parcel of change and culture generally to bring people on that journey.
Talent shortage.
Just trying to think from a talent shortage point of view. I mean, that's again, it's more about upskilling, right? I think that's where the upskilling piece comes in, and understanding your current talent pool and the type of skills that you might need, whether that's kind of looking at kind of skills matrix and keeping that up to date and the skills that you might need, and kind of the upskilling piece within the organisation. But also when you're attracting talent, and also we touched on earlier in terms of that diversity piece, is making sure that the opportunities to get talent are varied, right? So whether that's through events or how you socialise attracting talent, I think is important. But understanding the kind of the needs of your organisation as you transform into cloud, I think is equally important, and map that out, and then kind of do it in advance, but with the upskilling of your own employees at the same time. So it's kind of talent retention and talent attraction, right, are the two things that you need to look at.
Just an observation on that too. So I hire for both traditional on-premise infrastructure and cloud. And I don't know, have you tried looking for an SME for storage or servers lately in the market? Because I tell you, they are harder to find.
The tide's turned.
It is incredibly difficult to find talent for on-prem infra.
I 100% agree with that, Ross, and something that I have been dealing with personally over the last few weeks, leading to lots of like stressed out phone calls, trying to organize, we have one candidate for something that we need because there's nobody else, and we need that person to come and solve this problem for us. And it's just like, why is this so hard? And every CV you read just says cloud. And it's like, no, I have a certain need to deal with things on premise. This is it. And I think this is the interesting perspective that you both bring, having like dealt with that duality, right? It's not an easy place to be.
Yeah, totally. This doesn't come up very often, but one of the things I've learned is that it's not really the benefit of cloud. It's not just cloud, and it might seem really obvious to say this, but the benefit when you move to cloud is cloud native, right? Because you're not actually managing the infrastructure or the services yourself. And so every time you take a service and you put it not just in a cloud or in a hyperscaler, but you choose a cloud native equivalent, you're removing operational effort from your organization and roles that you no longer have to hire for, right? And if you do that, if you chip away at that for long enough, there's tremendous benefit to the organization in removing that risk of having to have people available who understand the inner workings of the infrastructure that supports that service.
And traditionally, they've been very hard jobs to do because that infrastructure can be very complex. And that's why, years of training. And that's what I was going to jump in before with, that as Karen was saying, the best way to get talent is to upskill your existing talent a lot of the time because they're there, especially the ones who want to learn. And upskilling for cloud, while not easy, it's relatively straightforward and not hard to try things out. But in your case, Ross, if you're trying to hire for, you've got a gap in your on-prem environment, you can't really do that because that skill takes years to learn. And you don't have the joys of playing and trying with things for a year or two. You need that person now.
Correct. Yeah, they're niche. They're very niche, specialized skills.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and I guess it's a balance between. So I guess when you're in the cloud, the skills become a bit more versatile. Yeah, but you might still need specialists if you're in the hybrid situation, right? So you might need some versatile skills, but you also might need specialist skills within the team to manage, particularly if you're hybrid. Yeah. So I would
especially around networking.
Yeah.
Oh, it's rough out there.
Yep.
I'm telling you. Another thing I think in terms of opportunities in 2025, I think that, you know, again, and like, I know we touched on this in the news, is that in the news. Um,
Is that your English accent?
no, I don't know. I don't know. Did we not used to call it the news? Like
I don't
the
know.
news, like that.
Maybe
Um,
news. Oh yeah, I see what you mean.
NOOZ in the news. No, I think, again, all the political instability might create some opportunities for people in this space, right, to get some really talented people. But I also think that if you can allow for some level of work from home, I think that that will be appealing to lots of talented people that potentially have a desire to leave organizations where they're not allowed to have that flexibility. I think that flexibility means a lot to people. So if you can more remote, and I think this also means like having, as an organization, as a leader, having a degree of flexibility in your agreements with people, right? It's like, well, when we hire specific skills, we may need to be more flexible, and having that understanding in our teams of, yes, we love everybody to be here a couple of days a week, but we work together, but we also acknowledge that it may not be possible in certain circumstances. Opportunities.
Yeah, agreed.
Opportunities for 2025.
Yeah, I think the work from home thing has become just as important when people are looking for a job now as the actual headline number, the salary that's being offered. People are definitely not open to roles that don't have work from home built into it.
Yeah, it's a hard sell. 5 days in the office is a hard sell. Sometimes you have to make, even as an organization, you might like to have everybody in. You say you're London based or whatever. You might like have everybody in a couple of days a week, but acknowledging that when you're hiring for certain skill sets, just given the scarcity of those skill sets, that you might not be able to do that with everybody.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just about having that flexible approach.
So the only other point that I wanted to talk about was AI. Touch on, I know, of the list of, I guess, global forces in 2025 making transformation even more challenging. The last thing that I wanted to cover off on was AI. I think obviously that's causing a lot of shifting market forces.
I think one of the things that I don't think we do very well when talking about AI in the enterprise yet is differentiating between the two core phases of AI, the training versus the inference side, right? So most organizations, most enterprises are not training their own models, right? They're using inference to enhance the customer experience or support their employees in their workflows, right? To assist them. Anywhere that AI can transfer the cognitive burden from the person into the AI model, it will be helpful, right? But that is just using AI as a feature, and AI will be a feature in everything, right? Every product and service will have some AI inference feature in it, and I've found it quite helpful to remind people that that's very, very different to training your own AI models. Hopefully, if your business is fortunate enough to have its own proprietary data sets, find an edge in the market against your competitors, the secret sauce that you're going to use AI for to beat your competitors, right? Yes. Everyone has access to the same features of AI for inference and assisting them in their workflows and assisting them on their websites. Everyone's got access to that tech. And so you just need to be quite aware of those two differences when starting the conversation with leaders, business leaders, when talking about the topic.
Totally. It's an interesting one. And I feel like I was having a conversation with someone the other day from a business that has a lot of data, a lot of like proprietary data. And they were telling me that the business had implemented like their own data lake and using AI to analyze that data and provide efficiency improvements. And they were basically telling me that it kind of hadn't worked in the way that they had anticipated. And I guess the core of that was that they perhaps didn't have the data that they thought that they did in the place that they thought it was.
Yeah.
And they were quite like disappointed about that. And I was like, that's kind of a fantastic achievement though, because obviously the people in your organization are going to need to have these skills in terms of training proprietary models and managing those types of data sets. I was like, you've kind of walked back what the requirement is, and you know what's missing now, and you can work to change your organization to fill that gap so that the technology can give you more efficiency improvements. And probably it's a bit of a red flag that maybe that information is not available as you thought it would be, given that it's quite pertinent to your business operations. So I think that that's a really good point, is like, where are you consuming AI as a product, perhaps for like development or for efficiency? And then where is there a need to actually train your own models and manage proprietary data sets? I agree. I think these are two separate things.
Yeah, I think the main message to any business leader when having this is don't underestimate the complexity of managing data, tagging your data versioning, which didn't used to even be a thing. It's now a thing. Training models, pre-training data set, like it's very, very, very difficult versus the other end of the spectrum, which is actually using a model, which is actually really easy.
Yes, and potentially quite high environmental impact. I don't think we're thinking about that.
And so when I said easy, I shouldn't underestimate the risk involved in, if you're offloading decision making.
No, agree.
Yeah. But in terms,
I think it's almost like using Copilot and ChatGPT and even like Claude. It's becoming like second nature, which is great from a productivity perspective, but I think maybe not so considered at times.
Yeah. Totally agree. You need to be careful, not only with the quality of the output, but what are you actually using it for? Are you inputting it into some decision that's being made on a customer's loan application or some sort of credit thing that you're doing? Like you need to be very conscious of biases in that data that was used. If you didn't train the model, you don't know what the data was.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a big question. Karen?
Yeah, no, I agree with all of those points actually, and things that were coming to mind when we were just talking was around the training and the prompt engineering piece, right? So it's all about how you prompt, right? And also the output that it gives you, you still need to be the judge, right? The human element still exists. But also it then has the advantages around the kind of efficiencies around, certainly around the Copilot, software engineering, etc., bringing that more efficiency, but you're still going to have to put that human element and judge it, etc. at the moment. But interesting to see how it progresses, right? And how much it's going to be used in the future. We know it's here. It's come quite quickly. But then it's making sure you've got the right skills to get the benefit out of it, I'd say, more than anything. Yeah.
Karen, you just reminded me of the time that, and Matt, I think you and I were talking about this like a couple of years ago. Someone stole Stack Overflow and
Yes.
it ended up on the website or something.
Yeah,
you just took me back to that.
Yeah, basically stole the thing from Stack Overflow and it appeared in I think it was in a car or something, the text, and it was like exact text from the Stack Overflow that someone developer used. I don't know if anyone remembers that. But
Check your
for
code.
some reason,
Check your code.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Where is the legal aspect in the code piece, right? What in terms of if it's been produced from an AI perspective, who owns it, right? So
yeah, I know. Where was it trained?
Yeah, exactly, right. So again, I think all that comes into it as well. So that's why you still need that human review and judge the output, definitely.
And that's kind of why the agentic AI is actually potentially dangerous, because you're letting it loose on your code, doing a whole bunch of stuff.
It all scares me a little bit.
Yeah, I don't want it in my
bit.
code. It's a little bit scary, but people swear by it. I think that was a good discussion.
All right. I think that brings us to time for today. Massive thanks to Karen and Ross for joining us for this conversation. I hope that has provided everybody with some actionable insights. That's definitely my goal for these sessions. Really grateful to you both for contributing to this and taking the time. Listeners, please tell me what you like, what you don't like. Are you enjoying the news? It's hard to know from the data that we receive on our side. So please tell me if you are enjoying the news or not. I wanted to mix things up in 2025. And if you have a topic idea or a guest or a question that you would like answered, please let us know. We will see you back next week for navigating data and AI in 2025. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.